Okay. Hello and good evening, everybody. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to our webinar today. We'll be going through data protection and privacy compliance. I'll be your moderator for the day. My name is Crystal Serena Vulavo. I'm a medical officer working in occupational health. I am based in Mombasa, and I am the secretary for the Managed Healthcare Committee at the Kenya Medical Association, which is a committee that is hosting today's webinar. I see that we have attained quorum. Attendance is good enough for quorum, so we will start in time today. And so just a bit of I think housekeeping before I introduce our speaker for the day. I'd like to encourage us to make use of the Ask Questions segment, so that if you have a question at any point, just type it in there, and then we will be able to go through the questions at the end of the presentation and avoid, maybe missing some things in the chat box instead. Although we'll also be trolling there for information in case it gets posted on there as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day. His name is Francis Monyango. So Francis is a privacy and data protection lawyer based in Nairobi. He has over 9 years of extensive experience in technology law and policy, with a specialization on privacy and data protection. He is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and is a fellow of information privacy, accredited by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. He's also currently serving as a group data protection officer at Old Mutual East Africa. And he has previously served as an IT and data governance research fellow at CIPIT, Strathmore University. He holds a Bachelor of Laws degree and has obtained additional certification in Certified Information Privacy Professional Europe and a Certified Information Privacy Manager. So I believe that we are very correct. I would be correct in saying that I am now handing you over into very good hands. And Francis, you may take it on from there. Karibuni sana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Francis Manyango, as introduced by Dr. Serena. Happy to be here this evening. I'm going to take you through data protection compliance and how to register with the Office of Data Protection Commission.
Francis, I don't know if it's just on my end, but we're not hearing you.
Serena, he's clear. He's very clear.
Thank you. I will proceed. So I think we're going to start talking about privacy and data protection and the distinction between the two. In Kenya, privacy is a right, and it's a right that is enshrined in the Constitution. And this right has two dimensions. If you read the Kenya Constitution, you'll realize that it has two dimensions. I'm going to talk about the two because as medical practitioners, you interact with these two aspects in various ways. The first one is on personal autonomy. Personal autonomy usually touches on the aspect of personhood and having a right to say what should be done on your body or on your person. A good example is before you administer any medicine on any individual, they have to give you consent to do that. So in that regard, a person exercises the right to privacy on aspects of personal autonomy when they are giving you permission to do a procedure or to administer medicine to them. The other aspect of privacy that is also there in the Kenya Constitution that also now gives us the data protection law is on informational privacy. Privacy on the information about yourself. That's your name, your address, your contact details, any information that can be linked to you as a natural person, that falls under the realm of informational privacy, hence And it has been expanded further to introduce some form of accountability for people who use data, and that is now data protection. So data protection, you can say, it's an aspect of privacy among the others, and it's pretty much how third parties handle information they hold about a person, and that handling, we define it as processing. So processing is any activity that you do on data, from collection to destruction, that is processing. And you can say ultimately that the data protection law gives effect to privacy provisions. Now, that still on definitions, you can say that I mentioned personal data, and in personal data there are various types of the two segments of personal data. You can say this: the general personal data, that's information such as the name, date of birth, ID number, passport number, driver's license, their PIN, nationality, contact information. And then there's the other type of personal data, which is now like sensitive personal data. Sensitive personal data is information about one's health status, ethnic or social origin, genetic data, biometric data, property details, marital status. Now that is sensitive personal data. So you'll notice that as health practitioners, you process both personal data and sensitive personal data, especially such as health records. That falls under the realm of sensitive personal data, and the standards required for such processing are quite high. Other definitions that you should take note of include data subject, data controller, data processor. So the data subject is you and me. We are data subjects in our own right, because it's our personal information or our personal data that is usually processed. The other one is data controller. Data controller is the individual who determines how personal data will be processed. And how do they do this? They give instructions. Like, for example, in the context of our medical service provider, you can give instruction to another service provider to do some activities and share the information with you. Probably somebody has visited your facility and they need an X-ray, and you don't have the facilities for the X-ray, but you need the X-ray for diagnosis purposes. So that instruction you're going to give that X-ray entity that conduct an X-ray on this individual. That is in that regard, you're the controller, and the person or the entity that is taking in the instructions, that's the processor. Now, I'll now talk about ODPC registration. I don't know how many of you saw this notice from the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council, which talked about the requirements for certification for all data handlers and processors. And pretty much stated that all entities must be registered with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner by the 31st of March. And this is a requirement pretty much just trying to encourage entities to be compliant with the provisions of the Data Protection Act. And by doing so, to think about their practices and how to be compliant with the law. So I will take you through why you should register as a data handler. First of all, it's a legal requirement for any entity that processes personal information to be registered. But now, as entities or individuals who process sensitive personal data, it's something that you can say it's more of a compulsory requirement for you. Section 18 of the Data Protection Act and the Data Protection regulations for registration of data controllers and data processors require that all public and private organizations and individuals processing personal data to be registered with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. Upon registration, the certificate of registration is valid for 24 months unless cancelled by the Data Commissioner. So are there exemptions? Are there exemptions for mandatory registration? Yes, but it's not. But I think I'll talk about that after I take you through this checklist. But now, of course, there's a criteria. Not all entities should register. There are some which are exempted. However, the regulations also contain a list of entities that have to register, regardless of whether they meet the threshold or not. So controllers and processors whose annual turnover is below 5 million and they employ less than 10 people are exempted from this mandatory registration. However, as I said, organizations that process personal data for the purposes listed in that schedule, even if the employee count is less than 10 and their revenue is less than 5 million Kenya shillings, they have to register. So where a controller and a processor does not meet both requirements for the turnover and employee count, they have to register. So even if, let's say, you make more than 5 million, you have a turnover of more than 5 million Kenya shillings per year, but your employee count is less than 10 million, is less than 10, you still have to register. So as long as you meet one of the requirements, you have to register. So what sectors are not exempted? This is the list of the sectors. I extracted this from the regulations, but pretty much political entities, credit bureaus, crime prevention and prosecution. So those are private security providers who provide CCTV, debt administration and factoring, gaming, provision of education. You can see there, health administration and provision of patient care. So if, as players in the health sector, you fall under the group of entities that have to register with the ODPC. Others include hospitality industry firms, insurance administration and undertakings. That's where me and my organization fall in because we are in an insurance, so we have to register. Faith-based organization and religious organizations, institutions also have to register. Other entities, the list is long, so include retirement benefit administration, property management, provision of financial services, telecommunications, businesses that are wholly or mainly in direct marketing, internet service providers, transport service firms, public sector bodies, and businesses that process genetic data. As health service providers, at some point, probably some of you process genetic data, and that also puts you in the list of people who have to register with the ODPC. So how much is the registration fee? It depends. There are several tiers. 3 to be specific. There's the smaller micro data controllers and processors. Then there's the medium, and there's the large. So small are those with an annual turnover of 5 million and 1 to 50 employees. Medium is for 5 million or less than 50 million and less than 100 employees, but more than 51 employees. Then large are those whose turnover is more than 50 million and more than 100 employees. And also public entities and non-profit making entities such as charities and religious entities are also required to register. This is the registration fee that each entity has to pay. I hope you can see my screen. For the small and micro data controllers and processors, it's 4,000 Kenya shillings. For the medium, it's 16,000. For the large, it's 40,000. For public entities, it's 4,000. And for religious entities, it's 4,000. So you'll notice that the bigger the organization, the higher you pay. Although now, from my experience, when it comes to re-registration, at the end of the 2 years after registration, the fees is a little bit less. So the initial registration fees is more, but the subsequent registration fees is less. So now that you know that you have to register as a data handler with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, how do you do it? I'll take you through step by step, the best way that I can, and then we'll call it a night. So how to register? Ensure that you have all the all these requirements. So a copy of the establishment documents, so that's like your if you're registered as a company, that one, or if you're registered as a sole proprietor, that certificate, the name and contact details, the description of purpose for registration, for which purpose personal data is processed. So why are you processing this personal data? Payroll, probably your few members of staff, your know your customer, registration, like when patients come to your establishment, you register, you want to know their names and you want to register them. So that's the description for the purpose in which personal data is processed. Description of the categories of personal data being processed. So the name, address, and the identification number. Description of categories of data subjects. So these are either employees, clients, students, suppliers, shareholders. So if it is clients, this is the information that I collect from clients. If it's employees, this is the information I collect from employees. Another thing that you also collect is the previous turnover and revenue of the entity seeking to be registered. So for from my experience looking at the portal, the previous KRA filing certificate is sufficient for that, or if you have returns, audited returns, you can also attach them to the application. And then also you in the portal, because this application is done in the ODPC portal. The ODPC is a registration portal. On the portal, you also disclose which measures have you put in place to protect personal data. So you identify the risks that you as a business or as an entity, you're likely to encounter. This include now unauthorized access and disclosure or theft, and now fraud, those risks. And then now you also highlight now for this risk, this is the security safeguards that I am deploying. E.g. now access controls, you have a visitors logbook, you have a privacy policy, you have trainings, have information security policy. So those are some of, so for each risk that you identify the safeguards that you're putting in place. In my experience, you need to put a minimum of 5 risks. So identify 5 risks that are relevant to your situation, and then and then each risk you highlight the necessary safeguards that you're putting in place, and be as detailed as possible. So step by step, go to the ODPC website. One has to access the online application portal, and then you create an account using a valid and accurate email address. It's good to have an email address that you're going to be viewing frequently, because anytime ODPC will want to reach out to you, they will be using that email account and be sending new messages to that email. Complete the application form by filling in the details, as I've just stated over there. The contact details have to be accurate and valid. And it's important because if, let's say, the regulator is looking for you and the contact details that you used are not accurate or valid, then there will be a miscommunication, and you can find yourself, probably they are trying to tell you something and they cannot find you because of the details that you shared with them. And then after you have input all those information and uploaded the establishing documents, a document detailing your employee count, that's pretty much like a memo, and then also the turnover evidence, the portal will the portal will inform you on how much you need to pay. So like probably it's 4,000, 16,000, or 40,000, depending on the details that you're going to input. And then you can pay via M-Pesa or debit cards or EFT or checks. But because of, I think last year there was some amendments in terms of government payments. So all these things go through eCitizen. So you just need to be alert on the method you're going to use. And my experience, M-Pesa works best because it's instant. And then once you do that, you just submit, and then you wait for an email informing you whether there are corrections that they need you to make, or whether they have issued you the certificate. So pretty much that's the process to register with the ODPC. And then you're going to be issued the certificate. For most entities, I usually advise people to register as both, because you find yourself playing both roles as a controller and a processor. So, but the process is the same for both instances. So, and the fees is also the same. And that, Telly, thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Francis. That was very concise. So you've taken us through the process, and I have, before people's questions start streaming in, I have a few clarifications as well. Okay, when we do this, I think like Eugene Nabiso would like us to go back to the projection of the step 2 to 3 so that he can, there's some things he'd like to see, I think he missed. So yeah, you can show us that while I ask the question. So when you're within the timelines, so like the 14 days that it takes for approval and whatever, would you be in the know regarding whether that would affect the deadline that has been given to practitioners to have the registration in place? So like today is the 13th. If I were to register next week, for example, after 14 days, we will already be in March, to be past the 31st of March, will be in April. So would that affect the validity, or would that attract a fine, or would you be able to answer that?
That's a very good question. To be honest, this was a directive from the KMP, Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Council. And how, from my experience, I haven't seen when the act came into force, there was no deadline for registration. There was no deadline for registration. This, I think, is the first time I've seen a deadline for registration. The other instances I've seen a deadline for registration are usually when, let's say, ODPC has put in place, has issued an individual with call it an enforcement notice. Let's say somebody has reported you for infringing on their rights, and then now they are doing the investigation and they find that you're not even registered with them. Then that's when they give like 3 months to be registered, to have a privacy policy in place, to have all these privacy safeguards in place. That's one instance where I've seen people having a deadline to like register. But for the most part, it's still being a continuous exercise, and it's been a continuous exercise. I'm not so sure about the approach that will be taken for medical service providers and practitioners, but personally, I think it's just best to start and to have filed the application. It's better to just have filed the application and to have started the process rather than not do anything.
Yeah.
Because yeah, if you have the receipt showing that, then it shows the intention of wanting to comply.
Okay, so
Yeah.
thank you very much. So in the chat box, we have Walter, who's asking, they've had difficulty in the past trying to log into the website. What is your advice?
Probably if it's a first time, two things. If you're in Nairobi, if you have difficulty, just go to the Britam office. That's what I've done sometimes, because I believe they were having some system enhancements late last year, and that affected how the portal worked. But also probably you can try a different browser, and also you can also email them or call the ODPC number and ask and just inquire and raise your issue with them.
Okay, sawa. Thank you. So we have Dr. Shah asking, do we need data protection if all our records are written and you're not using, nothing is digitized?
Yes, you're still processing personal information. You're still collecting people's information. So the scope of data protection is not about digitized information. It's about information. So you have information about people, because if somebody gets hold of that file and it has information, someone's health records, then
Yeah.
you're that's a breach. That's a breach. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next question. So we have someone that completed the application process, but because their email was offline, they were not able to make the payment or access the registration as it was no longer available. What should they do next?
If they have an account in the port, linking them to the on the an ODPC account, they should just be able to log in and to proceed from where they left. Because if you finish filling the form, even if you should be able to generate an invoice. So if you haven't generated the invoice, you just start the process again. But you should be able to generate an invoice and then use that invoice to pay on the DPC
Okay.
portal.
Okay, so I trust that answers your question, Alexandria. Next, we have a question submitted anonymously. So does this reduce the burden of organizations involved in research from including a section on data protection in their research proposals sent to ethics review committees?
No.
No. They still have to comply with that?
Yes.
Okay, sawa. Thank you. Next question. So for multinational companies or businesses that handle sensitive personal data and they are registered in the other country, are they also required to register in Kenya?
But how I look at it is, of course, for them to register to operate in Kenya, they have to be registered in some way, one way or the other. So yes, they are required to register in Kenya as well.
Okay, sawa. Thank you. Next question asks, should doctors operating from a co-working space that is already registered with ODPC also register as individually?
The question I ask, do they process their clients' information as a group of, as an entity or as individuals? So if they're working as a, let's say, yes, it's various doctors, but they're working together as like one company, then that company should be registered. But if they're working as individuals and each individual has their own records, then each individual should be registered, I believe.
Okay, so thank you for that. In the chat box, we have somebody asking whether if one falls under the category of exempt, do they still have to fill the forms?
But as a medical service provider, you are not really exempt. You fall under the compulsory in the compulsory registration, because leave out the issue of annual turnover and employee count. Because you are a health service provider, you have to register in the compulsory list.
Okay, so thank you for that as well. I'm trying to see if I don't see any raised hands or someone who would like to speak. Sawa. So I think
Share the with you, and then you'll be able to circulate to the members.
sawa. Thank you very much. So if they're not okay, let's see, something has popped up. Yes. What about NGOs?
What about NGOs? NGOs fall under non-government organization, and they also require to be registered. charity and non-governmental organizations, yeah, they're required to be registered as well.
Okay, so thank you for that. Another question: what resources are available to help through the registration process?
This one, I'm going to share the slides. Also,
Yes.
ODPC, if you call them, they're usually very helpful. To assist. Also, if you go to the website, I believe there are also some guidelines on how to register. But yeah, I can say there are quite a number. ODPC themselves, and also on their website, there's some information on how to register. And then also, my experience with the portal is that it's somehow the same way you just register for anything that you need to register. So probably the challenge might be some small understanding of small issues, but I think I've been able to explain them, especially now when you're talking about the risks and the safeguards. Over there, you need to list 5 of them. So if you don't list 5 of them, they'll send you an email to tell you to actually list 5 of them. So it's just best that you list 5 of them, right? And then you write the safeguards in with as much detail as possible so that you reduce the back and forth that you're going to have. Pro tip: the ODPC registration usually approves these applications on Mondays. So if you have done a good job, chances of you getting your certificate on by Tuesday are high. Not assured, I'm just saying. However, most of the time, you usually now get your feedback on the state of your application on Tuesday. Also, I have to admit that earlier this year, they had some delays because of various reasons, but also be alive to that there could also be delays.
Okay, so thank you very much, Francis. We have another question. In case a facility has a main facility and other branches, should they be separately registered with the ODPC? So that's the first part of the question. We can do that. We can tackle that one.
They should just, I think because look at it this way: for you to register, you use business registration certificate or your certificate of incorporation. So since that is registered, that is sufficient for the entire entity, regardless of branches and such. But let's say, I also acknowledge that you find that for some health service providers, they're franchises. And then being yes, they are trading with this name, but they're different clinics or facilities. Then each facility needs to register on its own.
Okay, so if they're all children of the parent branch, then one registration is sufficient. And I believe this also now the branches will be catered for when you're doing the count of data controllers and processors. Yes.
No, the branches will be, these branches have different staff. So you find that the count is almost even 200. So that will, when you're doing the employee count or that memo, you're going to list you're going to list, you just say the number of staff. You're going to look at your business as one single entity. Not like not in terms of the various branches that they have, but it's one company, it's one organization.
Yes. Okay, sawa. And then the second part of the question was okay, if a new branch will be operational from like after the time of the deadline, how would you approach that?
You just register. You just register. In the same way, you may find, let's say, businesses that were opened before some laws came into force. They complied with the laws of the land on that particular day. But over time, they start working on compliance for these new laws that are coming into force. But now, if the business that is being opened in 2025, you'll comply with the current laws. So you will comply with company laws, data protection laws, all these other laws that you have to comply with. So that shouldn't be an issue. You just register. Like the moment you've gotten the certificate, set now, the moment you've gotten a certificate, if it's a new entity, but if it's a branch, then then if it's just a branch, you're already covered. But if it's a new entity, then you have to register fresh. Hope I'm clear on that.
Yes, I believe that's clear. And I think also to just add on to that, the directive from KMPDC was also the 31st deadline is for already existing facilities. But after that, for a new registration, for any facility to be registered, they would have to be compliant before they can get registered. So that would cover for it's a whole new entity. Yeah, which is in line with what Francis has said. Next question. Why is the government exempting some organizations from this requirement?
It's more of a risk assessment because now you find some entities, their business operations have a lot of information to be in the business operations involve a lot of data sharing or data processing, and then there are others which the entire business operations involve almost zero personal data processing. But also, we are alive to the fact that we are living in a very digital age, and we have now issues, things such as mobile money, which now also make us processes of a lot of personal data. Back in the day, you could find that the only time that, let's say, a shopkeeper has your details is because there's a debt book, and over time they know everyone, so they know this is so and so, this and so and so and so. But the time that they keep records is when they are writing down that this individual owes me 400 shillings or 700 shillings. But now we are paying for transactions, we're using mobile money, and you find that this particular trader has all these transaction records because you paid them via mobile money, and that now includes your name and your name and the transaction amount. So it's more of the aspects of risk. You'll notice that for entities that have compulsory registration are entities that process sensitive personal information. So political opinion, that's sensitive personal information, religious beliefs, sensitive personal information. So those ones have to have compulsory registration. Health data goes without saying. Financial services or information about someone's property or someone's health, that's sensitive personal information. So that being you being processing sensitive personal information, you have to register with ODPC.
Okay. So thank you, Lee, that's well addressed. So someone else asks, when staff move on, I'm assuming from your facility, do you have to notify the ODPC?
No, not really. You need to have your own
Okay.
internal policies on how
Yeah.
you manage staff information. So, and I think recently we have seen a decision touching on a telco entity concerning the registration of a SIM card line that a staff member had. So that goes back to your internal policies. How do you manage this separation, and how do you also handle this information? Do you have it in place? It's good to document most of these things. It's good to have a policy and procedures that factor in the data protection safeguards that are required, so that you also don't have you also don't start dealing with complaints after this member of staff has left the organization.
Yeah.
So in short, data protection compliance is just not registering with the ODPC. In fact, registering with the ODPC is just a start, but it's way, and it's a journey. It's not a one-off event. It's not coming and just, although it helps to come and just set up the entire data protection practice, but now it's it's daily vigilance, ensuring that your processes and your business processes have factored in these safeguards that you have in place. If let's say you had a registration book and it's just left there for anyone to come and write down their names and anyone can come and peruse and see who else was here and who else wasn't here. Think about how can I improve this process? Should I
Yeah.
digitize it so that it's a form that it's filled? And that way I practice data minimization, which is a principle of data protection, while still meeting my statutory obligations to collect this information on people getting into my building. So think about those things.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So the next question is, what happens if you breach this requirement?
What happens if you reach this requirement? You have reached the Data Protection Act, and it has penalties. The penalties are assessed on depending um, to the extent of fault according to the ODPC compliance and inspection team. So pretty much that's like it's a legal requirement. You fail to meet a legal requirement, you face the consequences that are there in the law.
So as outlined in the act, yeah.
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
most of the time, if
Mm-hmm.
you to be honest, you find that you may get away with not complying until the day there's an incident. And then now you find that you have a lot to do, and you it's just that uh, you're given you're issued with an enforcement notice, and you cannot meet those things within 6 months. Because also remember, we are businesses and we have already existing processes and habits, and unlearning those ones and embedding new ones, training. Um, Probably at that time you're in the middle of engaging your clients in some other way that you should now start looking at the act, you start realizing that, oh, by the way, you are actually in breach of the law because you don't have their consents to engage in certain processes. So you find that you have so much to do with so little time, and there's somebody who wants to get compensation money from you. So my advice is usually just do the right thing, but just work on it slowly by slowly so that you achieve a point of, let me say, workable compliance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. I think also from the KMPDC end, your registration status will be at risk if you are an existing facility and do not comply by the end of this month. So there's also that aspect. Yes, so next question, I think this speaks more to your expertise in data safety and protection. In the case of a breach, what are the procedures that you can take to handle such a scenario?
Wow, wow, okay. That's a loaded question. But the thing is to contain the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Contain the situation. There's a fire in your kitchen, unazima gas. You extinguish the fire first.
Yeah.
And then you assess the situation, assess the level of damage, you assess the level of exposure, and then you remediate. Now at remediation, you start looking, okay, this is what happened, this is what led to this exposure, this is what we have done. Because your processes of sensitive personal information, you have a notification requirement to ODPC within 72 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, if you look at, it's not yet law, but now the Digital Health Act was enacted in 2023. 2024, the regulations were being discussed in quarter three, quarter four. And the Digital Health Act actually, in my opinion, will now come and enforce data protection law on health service providers in one way or the other. Because also there'll be the Digital Health Agency, and they'll also be receiving I'm not wrong, from my reading of those draft laws, there'll also be an incident reporting requirement to them as well. So just like the same way banks operate, there are various regulators. They have CBK, they have CBK, they have CA for some of the banks. They have NEMA, they have the Kanjo, they have ODPC. You find that now also as health service providers, health practitioners with establishments and entities, you have to be compliant with this. So now there's also another regulator coming, the Digital Health Agency, and they will also be tracking now the processing of health data. They're establishing health data banks and such. So if you read it, and there's an element of health data privacy, and it's really heavy on that, including now those reporting requirements in the unfortunate event of an incident. So no one usually wants an incident to happen, but it's good to be prepared so that you can be able to arrest the situation before it escalates, and it's blown out of proportion. And sometimes when you're doing when you're looking at when you're learning from the mistakes of others, you start noticing that sometimes some of these things would have been prevented by small measures small measures or safeguards that can be put in place. It may be a little bit expensive, but it will help you in the long run. Like like sometimes all you need to do is just frequently change your passwords. Change your passwords. You have members of staff leaving, and then the same passwords that they were using 2 years ago is still the password that's being used in use right now. And then people can log in and access information, and it's out there, and you don't know what to do. By the time you track it down, damage has already been done. Your clients are in your neck, your reputation is damaged, and ODPC is also seeking explanations. So small practices that will help you in ensuring that you're compliant with data protection laws, putting in place controls to enable you to have safer systems and safer processes will really go a long way.
Sawa. Thank you very much. So the next question is, does this registration involve even chemists and pharmacies, or is it strictly just for health facilities?
Allow me to answer a question with a question.
Mm-hmm.
So pharmacies and chemists, do they process personal health data?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they'll be able to see the diagnosis, and in that,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because they process sensitive, they're required to comply.
Mm-hmm. So even they are required to comply with that. I do think that, yes, there might be a bit of a
good example.
Yes.
Good. Remember, actually, there's a decision against Malibu Pharmacy by ODPC. So
yes.
So the expectation is that because they are health service providers, they're required to comply with the provisions of the Data Protection Act.
Okay, so I believe that answers Matthew's question. What might not apply to them might be the 31st of March deadline, because if they're not under KMPDC, then the 31st deadline might not be very strict, might not apply to them, but they still need to be compliant with that, yes.
Yeah, because ODPC still use them as a data processor, stroke data controller.
Yes. Thank you. Next question. Will the doctors or facility indemnity cover also extend to data breaches?
It's a very good question, but I don't think I have the answer for that. But also
Yes.
looking at insurance,
Mm,
I think what does your contract say? Like,
mm,
if that's part of what you're paying for, then maybe it should, because also there's the issue of cyber insurance in this age, where people are taking insurance in the event that they experience a breach and they have to make compensation payouts and pay out penalties to regulators. In Kenya, we haven't even had like penalty payments. They've been there, but not so many. Most of the payments that you've been reading from ODPC actually compensation orders, where you're compensating the complainant. In Europe, that's why you see Google and Meta and those other companies paying penalties to the regulators. But
yeah.
after an investigation, they found not to be compliant and they're paying a penalty. In Kenya, it's been mainly compensation orders after complaints. And the few entities that have paid penalties are after them not complying with the enforcement notice. So there's been a complaint made against you. It's investigated, a determination, or the PC comes up with a determination, and they give you a determination and an enforcement notice. So you work on that. You do not comply with that enforcement notice. Because you do not comply with that enforcement notice, they now penalize you for not complying with that enforcement notice. So you find that if it's your bad day or your bad month or your bad year, you will pay compensation to the complainant. And then if you fail to comply post the enforcement notice, you now pay a penalty. And penalties in Kenya, it's calculated in the millions, because I haven't seen a penalty under a million. Most compensation orders are in the hundreds of thousands. The lowest I've seen is 25,000. That was, I think, versus a decision versus AR.
Okay, so thank you for also phrasing the ranges of the numbers so that we are in the know. Yes. Next question asks, will government facilities and community health volunteers be required to comply with this requirement?
Government entities are required to register. But now, the way this is supposed to work is that it's an entity. So if you're working under an entity, you won't register as an individual. The entity that you're working under is the one that is supposed to register.
Okay.
So I don't think, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, community health workers work independently. So the entity that they're working for is the one that is supposed to register.
Okay.
And it's responsible for their training on data protection issues, responsible for now ensuring that they're also fully compliant.
Okay. Yes. Dr. Joy Mugabe is also echoing that sentiment. Government has to comply as an entity. Thanks, Dr. for adding to the discussion. Yes. So I do not see any raised hands, and I think we've addressed all the questions that we have received for now. So I will invite Dr. Kigondu, our president, to speak in a few minutes. So Dr. you can start preparing. Meanwhile, thank you very much, Francis. I believe you've taken us through the entire process, from what is required, that processing, how to go about it, and addressed our questions sufficiently. So we are very grateful for that, and we'll see, based on how the ground goes, how things go, if we will have a need for follow-up sessions, then we might also reach out. Okay, there's a raised hand. It's disappeared again. Okay, sawa. So, Dr. Kikondu, are you ready to say a few words now?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Serena. Thank you, Francis. I think I want to really stress the urgency of this matter. And I think Kenya Medical Association needs to take up more leadership in this matter and see how a lot of our doctors can get registered by the Office of the Data Protection Manager. After this, maybe you can work with Francis to see how practically to translate the webinar into actual registration, because a lot of people sort of have the knowledge now, but how do you practically translate these webinar into registration? Because we only have a few days left as per KMPDC guidelines, and we do not want our members to be locked out of business under the guise that they are not registered by ODPC. I also think that KMA needs to also advocate for, lesser fees. The number of fees that we are paying as medical practitioners in licensing are too much. And this ODPC just adds another layer of expenditure on fees. We don't know whether these fees are tax exempt. After you pay these fees, can you get it out of tax? But otherwise, it's important that we comply. And we want to thank Francis, and we hope that he will assist us going forward to help our doctors and anyone else who needs to register with ODPC register and be compliant. With that, I want to welcome all of you to some of these discussions we'll be having at the KMA Annual Scientific Conference in Kisii in August 14th to 17th. It's a big conference. April. Sorry, it was April.
Yes.
Yeah, April, in about a month's time. So we want to welcome everyone, because we'll be discussing some of these things. It's a lot of governance and these matters. So welcome all of you for that conference. With that, I want to thank you, and back to you, Serena.
Yes, thank you very much, Bona President. We have received the challenge to see how this can be we can have a step-by-step guide and how to communicate it to the members as well. I believe everybody that is here registered with an email address. So once we work on, like a guide and also the presentation that Francis did, then that can be shared to you via email. Yes, so the slides, and if we work on a guide, that will be sent as well. And you can also now correspond on the email in case you have any further inquiries or any challenges that you are unable to address either by yourself or with the ODPC, as Francis said, their email and phone hotlines. Yes, and so without further ado, I believe we are right on time to wind up this webinar. And once again, Frank, thank you so much. You've shed a lot of light on this. You have, yes, your inputs have been valuable, and we look forward to having you again sometime. So thank you, and thank you everyone. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next time.